My name is Clifford, and I am 54 years old. I still remember the way my ex-wife Diane smiled when she walked out of that courthouse 3 years ago. She had taken everything. The house we built together. Both cars. 80% of our savings. She looked at me like I was nothing, like 28 years meant nothing. But here is the thing she never understood. She had no idea what she was really taking from me that day. And she certainly had no idea what she was leaving behind. Before I tell you this story from the very beginning, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories about resilience, about finding yourself after losing everything, speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all started, to the day I first met her. It was the spring of 1994. I was 26 years old, fresh out of a woodworking apprenticeship program, and I had just started working at a small cabinet shop in Burlington, Vermont. My hands were rough from sanding my clothes, always carried the smell of sawdust, and I did not have much to my name except a strong back and a dream of someday building something meaningful with these two hands. I met Diane at a little coffee shop on Church Street. She was 24, working as a teller at the local bank, and she had this way of lighting up a room when she walked in. Her laugh was infectious. Her smile made me forget every word I had rehearsed in my head. I was never good with words, you see. I spent most of my days talking to wood and tools, not people. But something about her made me want to try. She noticed my hands that first day. Calloused, scarred, stained with walnut oil. She reached across the table and touched them gently. She said, "These are the hands of someone who creates beautiful things." I think I fell in love with her right there in that moment. Nobody had ever looked at my work that way. Nobody had ever made me feel like what I did mattered. We dated for 2 years. Diane talked constantly about our future together. She painted pictures of a big house with a white fence, children running in the yard, vacations, to places I had only seen in magazines. I listened to every word, and I made her a promise. I told her I would work hard every single day to give her the life she dreamed about. I meant it with every fiber of my being. We got married in the summer of 1996. It was a small ceremony at the old stone church on Maple Street. My father stood beside me as my best man. He was a carpenter himself, 72 years old at the time, and his hands looked just like mine, only more weathered by time. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside and handed me a leather tool roll. Inside were chisels, planes, and marking gauges that had belonged to his father and his father before him. 3 generations of craftsmen. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Son, these hands will feed your family. They will build your home. They will provide everything your wife and children need. But never forget, these hands can also create art. Do not ever let anyone make you believe your work is less than what it is." I held that tool roll close to my chest. I told him I would honor it. I told him I would make him proud. Those first years of marriage were good, or at least I thought they were. We bought a small starter home with our combined savings, nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom Cape Cod with a nice backyard. I built a workshop behind the house, a simple structure with good light and enough space for my tools. Diane seemed happy then. She would bring me coffee in the mornings and watch me work on the weekends. Our son Marcus was born in 1998. I remember holding him for the first time, this tiny, perfect human, and thinking that everything I did from that moment forward was for him. Sophie came along 3 years later in 2001. My little girl. I built her first cradle myself, carved little flowers into the headboard, sanded it smooth as silk. Those were the years of hope. I taught Marcus how to hold a hammer when he was barely old enough to walk. I let Sophie pick the colors for the birdhouses we built together on Saturday afternoons. Diane smiled and took photographs. We looked like the family she had always described. But there were signs even then. Small things I did not want to see. Diane would sometimes look at our neighbors' houses and sigh. The Hendersons had just put in an in-ground pool. The Marshalls bought a new SUV. Why could we not have nice things like that, she would ask. I told her we were building something solid, that it takes time. She would nod, but her eyes told a different story. During those years, something else was growing quietly in my workshop. After the day job at the cabinet shop, after the kids were in bed, I would slip outside and work on my own projects. Not cabinets, not shelves, real woodworking, sculptural pieces, furniture that was more art than function. I taught myself techniques from old books I found at estate sales. I learned to see the grain in the wood, to work with it instead of against it. One day in 2003, I entered one of my pieces in a local craft fair. A hand-carved rocking chair made from black cherry. It did not win any prizes, but a man approached me afterward. His name was Harold, and he ran a small gallery in Boston that specialized in American craft furniture. He gave me his card. He said, "You have something special here. Real talent. Stay in touch with me. I want to see where this goes." I put that card in my wallet and kept it there. I did not tell Diane about it. She had already started making comments about my workshop time being wasted hours. I did not want to give her another reason to question what I was doing out there. So I kept Harold a secret. I kept that whole part of myself hidden away, nurturing it in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. The cracks started showing around 2008. The financial crisis hit everyone hard, and the cabinet shop where I had worked for 14 years had to let people go. I was one of them. Suddenly, at 40 years old, I found myself unemployed with a mortgage payment coming due and 2 kids who needed braces and school supplies and all the things children need. I made a decision. Instead of looking for another job working for someone else, I would start my own business from the workshop in our backyard. Custom cabinetry, built-in shelving, whatever people needed. It was risky, but I believed in my skills. I believed I could make it work. Diane did not share my belief. The first time she said it, we were sitting at the kitchen table going over bills. She looked up at me with something in her eyes I had never seen before. Disappointment, maybe. Or worse, contempt. She said, "Is this it, Clifford? Are you going to be just a carpenter forever?" I did not know how to answer her. Being a carpenter was not just what I did. It was who I was. It was how I understood the world, through the feel of wood under my hands, through the satisfaction of joining pieces together into something useful and beautiful. How could I explain that to someone who saw it as something to be ashamed of? She started comparing me to other husbands. Her friend Margaret was married to a lawyer. Sandra, from her book club, had a husband who was some kind of financial consultant. They had boats. They had vacation homes. They did not come home smelling like sawdust. One evening, she told me she could not go to the neighborhood holiday party with me. When I asked why, she said she was embarrassed. Embarrassed to tell people her husband was a carpenter. Embarrassed that we still drove the same truck I bought in 1999. Embarrassed by me. I stood there in our kitchen, sawdust still in my hair, and I felt something inside me start to crack. The distance between us grew wider with each passing month. Diane filled her time with activities that did not include me. Book clubs, yoga classes, charity luncheons. She made new friends, women who wore designer clothes and talked about their ski trips to Aspen. She came home later and later, and when she did come home, she barely looked at me. I worked harder. I took every job I could find, sometimes working 16-hour days to keep up with the bills and prove to her that I was worth something. But no matter how much I brought in, it was never enough. The goalposts kept moving. First, it was a bigger house. Then it was a nicer car. Then it was private school for the kids. I was running a race I could never win. One night, I came home after a long day installing custom cabinets for a client in Montpellier. It was past 9 o'clock. My back ached. My hands were cramped from hours of precision work. I walked into the kitchen expecting to find dinner, but the room was dark and empty. I heard Diane laughing in the living room. She was on the phone with someone, her voice light and flirty in a way I had not heard in years. She did not even notice me standing in the doorway. I watched her for a moment. This woman I had married, this woman I had built my entire life around, and I realized she had become a stranger to me. On the counter, I found a plate covered in plastic wrap. Dinner cold and congealed. A note beside it said, "Eat whenever." I sat down at that kitchen table alone and ate my cold dinner in silence. And I asked myself, what am I doing wrong? What more can I give? The contempt became more open as the years went on. Diane started criticizing me in front of the children, and that hurt more than anything else. "Do not end up like your father," she would tell Marcus. "Working with your hands is no way to make a living." Marcus was 14 then, at that age where boys start deciding who they want to be. He began pulling away from me. The weekends we used to spend together in the workshop became fewer and further between. Eventually, he stopped coming out there at all. Sophie was 11, still young enough to want to spend time with her dad. But even she started making excuses. Too much homework. Plans with friends. Slowly, painfully, I felt my children slipping away from me, and I did not know how to stop it. For our 15th wedding anniversary, I made Diane a jewelry box. It was one of the finest pieces I had ever created. Curly maple with ebony inlays, hand-cut dovetails, a velvet-lined interior. I spent 3 months on it, working late at night after everyone was asleep. When I gave it to her, she looked at it the way you might look at a coupon for a restaurant you do not like. She said, "Thanks, Clifford. But honestly, I would rather have something from an actual store." She put the box on a shelf in her closet and never mentioned it again. I found it weeks later, pushed to the back behind her shoeboxes, forgotten. That night, I carried the jewelry box out to my workshop and set it on my workbench. I sat there in the dark for a long time, just staring at it. All those hours, all that care. All that love poured into something that meant nothing to her. But something else was happening in that workshop. Something she did not know about. Harold from Boston had stayed in touch over the years, occasionally buying small pieces from me, encouraging me to keep developing my craft. Through Harold, I had quietly built a small network of collectors who appreciated what I did. They did not see a carpenter. They saw an artist. I opened a separate bank account, not to hide money from Diane, but because she had no interest in knowing about this part of my life. The amounts were modest at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. But they were mine. Earned by my hands creating things that mattered to people who understood their value. I started signing my pieces with a small stamp. C. Walker. An artist name for the artist I was becoming. Nobody in my little town knew that the quiet carpenter with the sawdust-covered clothes was slowly building a reputation in the world of fine craft furniture. And I intended to keep it that way. The autumn of 2018 changed everything. I discovered Diane was having an affair. I found out in the most ordinary way possible. She left her phone on the kitchen counter one morning while she was in the shower. It buzzed with a message, and I glanced at the screen without thinking. The name said Victor, and the preview showed words that no husband should ever have to read from another man to his wife. I stood there frozen, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Then I picked up the phone and read through months of messages. Love notes, inside jokes, plans to meet at hotels while I was working. Photographs I wish I had never seen. Victor turned out to be a real estate broker from Diane's social circle. Tall, polished, the kind of man who wore expensive watches and talked about his portfolio at dinner parties. Everything I was not. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. When Diane came downstairs, freshly showered and smiling, I said nothing. I needed time to think. I needed to figure out what to do next. But even more painful than the affair was the realization of how much I had lost my children. Marcus was 20 years old by then, finishing his second year at the University of Connecticut. When I called him to talk, just to hear his voice, to maybe find some comfort from my own son, he cut me off within minutes. "Dad, I am really busy right now. Can we talk later?" Later never came. Sophie was 17, focused on her senior year and college applications. She was polite when we crossed paths in the house, but there was no warmth there, no connection. I realized with a terrible clarity that Diane had spent years painting a picture of me as the absent father, the man who cared more about his workshop than his family. She had turned them against me without me even knowing it was happening. I tried to remember the last real conversation I had with either of my children. The last time we laughed together. The last time they came to me with a problem or a question, or just to say hello. I could not remember. The memories had faded into a blur of missed moments and closed doors. The months that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. Diane and I lived in the same house but occupied different worlds. She stayed out late with Victor, not even bothering to hide it anymore. She would come home smelling of his cologne, and I would pretend not to notice. I spent more and more time in my workshop. It was the only place that made sense. The wood did not judge me. The tools did not ask questions. I could lose myself in the rhythm of planing and sanding and carving, and for a few hours I could forget that my life was falling apart around me. One night, Harold called from Boston. He was putting together a major exhibition of contemporary American craft furniture, pieces from the best makers in the country. He wanted me to participate. "Clifford," he said, "I have been waiting 15 years for you to be ready. Are you ready now?" I looked around my workshop at the half-finished pieces and the piles of shavings. I thought about Diane in the house behind me, probably texting Victor at that very moment. I thought about my children, who barely knew me anymore. "Not yet," I told Harold. "I am not ready yet." He said he understood. He said the door would always be open. I thanked him and hung up the phone, then sat there in the dark until my legs went numb. The formal end came in the fall of 2021. Diane walked into my workshop one evening, something she almost never did anymore, and handed me a manila envelope. "I want a divorce," she said. My lawyer prepared the papers. I opened the envelope and read through the demands. She wanted the house, both vehicles, 80% of our joint savings account, full custody considerations for Sophie until she turned 18. Her lawyer had been thorough. I looked up at Diane standing there with her arms crossed, already victorious in her mind. She said, "You can keep your little workshop, and whatever junk is in there." I noticed she did not even know about the separate account. She had no idea about Harold, or the collectors, or the quiet reputation I had been building for nearly 2 decades. She saw a carpenter with sawdust in his hair. That was all she had ever seen. What she also did not know was that our house, the house she wanted so badly, carried a $200,000 second mortgage that I had taken out years earlier to pay for the renovations she demanded. The cars were both still being financed. The savings account she thought contained our life earnings had been steadily depleted by her spending habits. I could have told her all of this. I could have fought. But looking at her face, I realized something important. I was tired. Tired of fighting for a marriage that had died years ago. Tired of proving my worth to someone who would never see it. Tired of holding on to things that were dragging me down. So I said nothing. I signed where she told me to sign, and I let her believe she had won. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in March. I remember the weather because it matched exactly how I felt inside. Cold, overcast, empty. The courtroom was small and smelled like old paper and floor wax. Diane arrived with Victor by her side, dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than I made in a month. She looked radiant, triumphant. She had clearly been planning this moment for a long time. Marcus and Sophie were both there. They sat on their mother's side of the courtroom, which told me everything I needed to know about where their loyalties lay. Marcus stared straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes. Sophie glanced at me once when I walked in, and I thought I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or sadness. But then she looked away, and the moment passed. I came alone. No lawyer to speak of, just a legal aid attorney who helped me understand what I was signing. I wore clean clothes, pressed and neat, but nothing fancy. I was who I was, a working man, a carpenter. Diane's lawyer did most of the talking. He went through the settlement agreement point by point, emphasizing how generous Diane was being in allowing me to keep my tools and workshop equipment. He made it sound like she was doing me a favor. When the judge asked if I had anything I wanted to say, I stood up slowly. Every eye in that room was on me. Diane looked slightly nervous, probably worried I was going to make a scene. I said, "Your Honor, I only want to keep one thing that is not listed in these papers. My father's tools. They have been in my family for 4 generations. They have no real monetary value, but they mean everything to me." Diane actually laughed. She said, "Oh, for goodness sake, just take your rusty old tools, Clifford." The judge made a note and approved the request. And just like that, it was over. 28 years of marriage dissolved in less than an hour. When I walked out of that courtroom, I passed right by my children. Marcus did not even look up. But Sophie met my eyes for just a second. There was something there, something she wanted to say. I could feel it. But then Diane called her name and she turned and walked away with her mother. I drove back to the house one last time to collect my things. The workshop was mine according to the agreement, so I had a few days to clear it out before Diane took full possession of the property. I loaded my father's tools into my truck first, then the pieces I had been working on, then the wood I had been saving for special projects. The house itself looked different to me now, smaller somehow, less important. I realized I had spent decades of my life paying for walls and a roof that never really felt like home. The workshop was where I belonged. The workshop was where I was myself. That first night after the divorce, I slept in my truck outside a motel I could not afford to rent. The next morning, I drove to my workshop and sat on the old stool I had made years ago, the first piece of furniture I ever built with my father's tools. I sat there as the sun came up through the dusty windows, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I cried. I thought about Diane probably celebrating her victory with Victor right now. I thought about my children who had chosen her over me. I thought about 28 years of trying to be enough for someone who would never be satisfied. But then I looked down at my hands. Rough, calloused, scarred. These hands had built houses, created furniture, shaped raw wood into objects of beauty. These hands were still mine. Nobody could take them from me. I picked up one of my father's chisels, the handle worn smooth by 3 generations of use. I remembered his words from my wedding day. These hands can also create art. Do not ever let anyone make you believe your work is less than what it is. And there, in that empty workshop surrounded by sawdust and memories and pain, I made a decision. I was not going to wallow. I was not going to feel sorry for myself. I was going to start over. Not to prove anything to Diane. Not to get revenge. But for myself. Because I was 54 years old and I still had something to give. What Diane did not know, what she would not discover for months, was the truth about everything she had taken. The house she was so proud of winning came with a massive debt attached. The mortgage payments she would now have to make alone were far more than she realized. The cars would need to be refinanced or returned. The savings account, once she paid off the credit cards, and the home equity line would be nearly empty. She had taken everything I had. But everything I had was already broken. The chains she put around herself that day were heavier than she could possibly imagine. And what she left behind, my tools, my skills, my reputation that she never knew existed, my connections in the art world, my ability to create something from nothing. Those were the things that actually mattered, and those were the things she could never touch. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, I made a phone call that changed my life. Harold answered on the second ring. Before he could even say hello, I told him I am ready now. If there is still room in that exhibition, I want in. There was a long pause. Then Harold laughed, a warm and genuine sound. Clifford, he said, I have been waiting almost 20 years for this call. Of course there is room. Let us make some art. I got to work immediately. I had nothing left to lose and everything to prove, not to anyone else, but to myself. I converted my workshop into a full-time studio, sleeping on a cot in the corner, eating simple meals at my workbench. Every dollar I had went into materials. I bought the finest hardwoods I could afford. Black walnut, figured maple, quarter sawn white oak. The collection I created was called Things That Cannot Be Taken. Every piece was a meditation on what truly matters in life. A rocking chair carved from a single piece of cherry designed to embrace whoever sat in it. A dining table with legs that looked like hands reaching upward, supporting the surface where families would gather. A jewelry box similar to the one Diane had rejected, but even more refined, more perfect. The centerpiece was a sculptural work I called The Carpenter's Hands. It was a life-size rendering of hands at work, carved from the stump of an old maple tree that had fallen in a storm. The grain of the wood became the lines in the palms, the natural variations became calluses and scars. It was the most personal piece I had ever made. Harold came up from Boston to see the collection a month before the exhibition. He walked slowly through the workshop, touching each piece carefully, not speaking. When he finished, there were tears in his eyes. Clifford, he said, this is the best work you have ever done. This is the best work I have seen in 30 years. You are going to change some lives with this. The exhibition opened 6 months after my divorce at the Harrison Gallery in Boston, one of the most respected venues for American craft furniture on the East Coast. For the first time ever, I was introduced to the public as C. Walker, the mysterious Vermont woodworker, whose pieces had been quietly collected by connoisseurs for nearly 2 decades. The opening night was overwhelming. Critics came, collectors came, journalists came. People crowded around my pieces, asking questions about technique and inspiration and meaning. I answered as honestly as I could, though talking about my work was still harder than making it. Every single piece sold that night. The smaller items went for $15,000 to $20,000 each. The dining table sold to a museum in Chicago for $65,000. And the carpenter's hands, the piece I had poured my whole broken heart into, sold to a private collector for $120,000. I stood in the center of that gallery, surrounded by people who valued what I did, who saw beauty in the work of my hands, and I felt something I had not felt in decades. Pride. Not arrogant pride. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had created something meaningful, something that would outlast me, something that mattered. With the money from the exhibition, I bought a small piece of land outside of town. Nothing fancy, just 5 acres with a nice slope and good light. I designed and built a new workshop there exactly the way I had always dreamed. High ceilings, big windows facing north, a wood stove in the corner for cold Vermont winters. I did not buy a big house to go with it, just a simple cabin small enough to clean in 10 minutes, big enough to hold everything I actually needed. For the first time in my adult life, I was not paying for someone else's dreams. I was living my own. The orders started coming in faster than I could fill them. Collectors, designers, even a few celebrities whose names I recognized from magazines. Everyone wanted a piece by C. Walker. I hired a young apprentice, a kid named Danny, who reminded me of myself 30 years ago, and I started teaching him the way my father taught me. Meanwhile, in the house she had fought so hard to win, Diane was learning the truth about her victory. The first call from the bank came within weeks of her taking possession. The second mortgage payments were now her responsibility, and they were substantial. Victor, it turned out, was not as successful as he pretended to be. When he realized Diane was not the wealthy divorcee, he imagined he disappeared faster than morning frost. The cars were next. When she could not keep up with the payments, they were repossessed. Then the credit card companies started calling. Then the home equity line came due. Within a year of taking everything, Diane had almost nothing. She was forced to sell the house at a loss just to get out from under the debt. After the banks took their share, she walked away with less than what she started with. The victory she had celebrated in that courtroom turned to ashes in her hands. I heard about all of this secondhand through mutual acquaintances and occasional updates from Sophie. I took no pleasure in Diane's downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching her struggle. I had moved beyond that. I was too busy building my new life to waste energy on old resentments. But I would be lying if I said there was not a certain justice in it. She had spent 30 years looking down on what I did. She had called my work worthless, my hands embarrassing, my dreams foolish. And in the end, those hands, those dreams that work, were the only things of real value I ever had. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon in the fall of 2022, about a year and a half after the divorce, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path leading to my new workshop. I was in the middle of hand-planing a board of figured maple, lost in the rhythm of the work, and I did not look up right away. Then I heard a voice I had not heard in person for almost 2 years. Dad Sophie stood in the doorway. She was 22 years old now, a college graduate, a young woman I barely recognized. In her hands, she held something that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the jewelry box. The one I had made for Diane all those years ago. The one she had rejected and forgotten. "I found this," Sophie said, "when Mom was packing up the house to sell it. It was in the back of a closet behind some old shoes." She stepped into the workshop, slowly looking around at the space I had built, at the tools and the wood and the pieces in progress. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying on the drive over. "Did you make this for her?" she asked, holding up the jewelry box. I nodded. "For your mother? For our 15th anniversary." Sophie set the box down on my workbench and ran her fingers over the smooth maple surface, tracing the ebony inlays. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Why did I never see this before?" "Because she did not want you to," I said. "And because I stopped trying to show you." We talked for hours that afternoon. Sophie told me things I had never known about the years when she was growing up. How Diane had constantly criticized me behind my back. How she made the children feel guilty for spending time with me. How she painted a picture of a father who cared more about sawdust than his own family. I was so young, Sophie said, tears streaming down her face. I believed everything she told me. I did not know any better. And by the time I was old enough to question it, I had already pushed you away. I am so sorry, Dad. I put down my tools and crossed the workshop to where my daughter sat crying on an old wooden stool. I wrapped my arms around her the way I used to when she was small, and I held her while she sobbed. "You do not need to apologize," I said. "You were a child. Children believe what their parents tell them. That is not your fault. What matters is that you are here now. That is all that matters." From that day forward, Sophie became a regular visitor to my workshop. Sometimes she would just sit and watch me work, asking questions about technique and wood selection. Other times she would help out sanding pieces or organizing supplies. She even started learning a few basic skills enough to make a simple cutting board on her own. Having her back in my life was a gift I never expected to receive. It did not erase the lost years, but it gave me hope that lost time could be redeemed. Marcus was a different story. He did not come back, not at first. But there were signs that something was shifting in him too. A few months after Sophie reconnected with me, I received a phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was Connecticut. I answered it cautiously. "Dad." It was Marcus. His voice sounded older, more tired than I remembered. "I saw the article about your exhibition," he said, "in the Boston Globe. Someone at work showed it to me." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, working up the courage to say whatever came next. "I did not know," he finally said. "I did not know you could do that. I did not know you were that." "I am still the same person I always was," I told him. "I am still just your father who works with wood." "No," he said. "I mean yes, but also no. I have been thinking a lot lately. About things Mom used to say. About how I treated you. About all those years I wasted being angry at you for things that were not your fault." I did not push him. I did not demand an apology or an explanation. I just said, "The door to my workshop is always open, Marcus. Whenever you are ready." He was not ready yet. But the fact that he called the fact that he was thinking about these things was enough for now. Healing takes time. I knew that better than anyone. 2 years after the divorce, Diane came to see me. I was not expecting her. I looked up from my workbench to see her standing in the same spot where Sophie had stood months earlier, but the scene could not have been more different. Sophie had come seeking connection. Diane looked like she was seeking shelter from a storm of her own making. She had changed. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by something simple and worn. The confident posture had crumbled into something smaller, more fragile. The woman who had walked out of that courthouse 2 years ago believing she had won the war now looked like someone who had lost everything. "Clifford," she said quietly. I wanted to talk." I set down my tools and wiped my hands on my apron. I gestured to a chair I had made for visitors, and she sat down carefully, like she was not sure she was welcome. We talked for about an hour. She told me about losing the house, about Victor leaving, about the financial struggles that had consumed the last 2 years of her life. She did not ask for money, which surprised me. She did not ask for forgiveness, either, not directly. What she said was this: I was wrong about you. All those years I was wrong. I thought you were holding me back. I thought you were the reason we did not have more. But the truth is, I never appreciated what we had, because I was too busy wanting what we did not have. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I sat in silence for a moment, organizing my thoughts. Then I said, Diane, I do not hate you. I did for a while, but I do not anymore. Hating you was like carrying around a weight that only hurt me. So I put it down. I hope you find what you are looking for. I hope you find peace. But I cannot give that to you. You have to find it for yourself. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. Then she stood up and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold and turned back. Those things I said about your work, she said, about you being just a carpenter. I was so wrong. I see that now. What you create it is beautiful, Clifford. It always was. I was just too blind to see it. Then she was gone. I never saw her again after that day. That night after Diane left, I sat alone in my workshop as the sun went down. I thought about everything that had happened. The love and the loss, the betrayal and the rebuilding, the children I almost lost and was slowly getting back, the art I had finally set free into the world. And I realized something important. I was not angry anymore. Not at Diane. Not at the years I felt wasted. Not at the system that let her take everything I had worked for. All of that weight, all of that resentment, I had finally set it down. I was free. Maybe for the first time in my entire adult life, I was truly free. Here I am now, 3 years after the divorce, sitting in the workshop I built with my own hands on land that belongs to me and no one else. The morning sun is coming through the big north-facing windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The wood stove is crackling softly in the corner. The smell of fresh-cut oak fills the air. Sophie comes by every weekend now. Sometimes she brings friends to show them her father's work. She is learning the craft herself, slowly but steadily. Last month, she finished her first real piece, a small side table made from reclaimed barnwood. It was not perfect, but it was honest. I was so proud of her, I could barely speak. Marcus finally came home 6 months ago. He drove up from Connecticut without calling ahead, just showed up at the door of my cabin one Saturday morning. We did not say much at first. We walked around the property together, looked at the workshop, watched the sun rise over the mountains. Then he turned to me and said the words I had been waiting years to hear. I am sorry, Dad. I am sorry for everything. We hugged for a long time, 2 grown men crying in the middle of a Vermont meadow, releasing all the pain and misunderstanding of the lost years. We are still rebuilding our relationship. It is awkward sometimes, but we are trying. That is all I ever wanted. The local community knows who I am now. Not the famous artist C. Walker, but Clifford the woodworker, the quiet man who builds beautiful things and gives back what he can. I teach free classes on weekends for young people who want to learn the old skills. I donate pieces to charity auctions. I mentor apprentices who remind me of myself when I was young and hungry and full of dreams. I look at my hands now, these weathered old hands that have been with me through everything, and I see my father's hands. I see his father's hands before him. 4 generations of craftsmen passing down knowledge and skill and love through the simple act of working with wood. The tools that Diane laughed at, those rusty old things I was allowed to keep, they sit in places of honor throughout my workshop. Each one tells a story. Each one carries the memory of hands that held it before mine. And someday, those tools will pass to Sophie or Marcus or one of my apprentices, and the cycle will continue. Diane thought she took everything from me that day in the courtroom: the house, the cars, the savings. But the truth is, she took the things that were holding me back. She took the debts and the responsibilities and the expectations that were crushing me slowly, year by year. She set me free without even knowing it. What she could not take, what nobody can ever take, is the gift my father gave me. These hands, this knowledge, the ability to create beauty from raw materials, the understanding that a person's worth is not measured by what they own, but by what they can contribute to the world. I am 57 years old now. I have more years behind me than ahead of me. But for the first time in my life, I am not worried about the future. I am not anxious about money or status or what other people think. I wake up every morning excited to work, grateful for another day with my hands and my tools and my purpose. If you are listening to this story and you feel like you have lost everything, I want you to know something. Sometimes losing everything is exactly what you need. Sometimes the things we hold on to most tightly are the things that keep us from becoming who we are meant to be. And sometimes the greatest gift someone can give us, even if they mean it as a curse, is the freedom to start over. Diane smiled when she walked out of that courthouse because she thought she had won. But she did not understand what she was really taking. She was taking chains I did not know how to remove myself. She was taking burdens I had been carrying so long, I forgot they were not part of me. And she left behind everything that truly mattered: my hands, my heart, my art, my children who eventually found their way back home. So if you ask me who won that divorce, I would say we both did in different ways. She got what she wanted, and I got what I needed. Now I spend my days making beautiful things in a workshop filled with light. I spend my evenings with my children rebuilding relationships I thought were lost forever. I fall asleep each night, grateful for this strange, painful, beautiful journey that brought me here. And I wake up each morning with these two hands ready to create something new. That is my story. The story of how I lost everything and found myself. The story of what my wife took from me and what she could never touch. I want to thank you for staying with me through this whole story. It means more than you know. Before you go, I have a question for you. Have you ever lost something you thought was everything only to discover it was actually setting you free? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. We are all in this together, learning from each other, supporting each other through the hard times. If this story touched you in any way, please consider giving it a like. It helps more people find these stories and maybe find some comfort in knowing they are not alone. If you have not already, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you do not miss any future stories. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, someone who is going through a difficult time or feeling like they have lost everything, please share this video with them. Thank you again for being here. May your hands always find meaningful work. May your heart always find its way home. And may you always remember that the things that truly matter can never be taken from you. Until next time, this is Clifford signing off.